Hey class, so this is the last video for this week. I'm going to go over editing and layering our audio that we collected in the previous video. And then I'll talk a little bit about just posting something for the weekly blog for this week at the end. So let's just get into it. So we're just going to go over a couple of editing techniques. So let's go to this view. So we've imported a bunch of audio into our project. I actually don't need this iPhone audio, so let's get rid of that. We've got a lot of music, we've got our little bell, and we've got our podcast intro vocal part. So I'm not going to make this very long. Your project should be a little bit longer. Actually, we should check let's see what the assignment requirements say. That doesn't actually say a length. Okay. So, should be, here, it should be at least 1 minute and no longer than 3 minutes. Okay, so your project should be between 1 minute and 3 minutes. So mine's not going to be that long because I'm just kind of demoing stuff, but just to keep that in mind. Anyway, let's edit our music first. So I want to have the music kind of like fade in at the very beginning. That's the first thing that we're going to hear. And then it's going to fade down a little bit when our voice comes in. So let's zoom in a little bit here and let's just listen to the beginning of the music. So that's pretty boring. I don't really want to start there, so let's move ahead a little bit. Okay, so that's a lot more interesting. So I want to cut to here. So I'm just going to select this whole section and cut. But I'm going to have a little bit of an issue with that. So let's increase this view a little bit. Let's rewind. So one thing that we want to avoid when we're editing audio is clipping our headphones or our speakers. That means that we have like a very quick jump from silent to loud. And so if I move this a little bit ahead, if we don't have any audio here and then we play the music, it's going to sound bad. It's going to sound like this weird clip. It doesn't sound natural. So let's listen to that. Okay, so it's very subtle. Let's move this a little bit farther ahead. So it's hard to hear here because of the quality of the music here, but it is something that we want to avoid. So let's go over a couple ways that we can deal with this. So one way, and this is kind of the simplest way, I'm going to move this back here, is I can just kind of choose this section here and add in a fade. So you can see up here, this is like less than half a second, so it's a very quick fade, but it's just a way to get rid of the potential clip there. To add that fade, I go to Effect, and I go to Fading, and I just do a fade in. And so that's really simple. So it's just gonna fade in over this kind of short period of time. Okay, so now we have a little fade in. The other way that I could do that, and this would be useful if I wanted to do a longer fade in, I'm gonna leave that there, but let's imagine that I wanted to do a longer fade in. The way I could do that is using the automation tool. So if I click on this tool here that looks like two dots connected, this brings up the automation tool. And this lets me automate the volume. So rather than just turning the volume all the way up or all the way down, like I could with this fader, I can add points using this tool, and then I can adjust the volume at those points. So let's say after I have my first fade in, I want to keep fading in. I can add a point here and then add a point over here, and then I can fade between those 2 points. So you can see when I lower this point, I'm lowering the amplitude, and the program is going to do the work of increasing the volume over that period of time. Let's actually zoom out a little bit, and I'm going to move this dot over. You have to be a little careful here because sometimes when you're trying to click on a dot, you end up adding a second dot instead, which is not what I want to do in this case. So let's listen to this now. Okay, so you can kind of hear it getting louder, but we can make that even more clear if we make this first dot much quieter and drag the second dot over here. Also, if you leave the area, suddenly it becomes 0, so you have to be careful with that as well. So that's a pretty good fade in. I'm pretty happy with that. Let's move this down just a little bit. We don't want our music to be too loud. So let's see how that sounds. Okay, so that's pretty good for our music. So let's make this a little smaller, and let's go back to our selection tool. Okay, so now we've got our music in. Let's bring in our intro voice. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit. I'm going to move my voice clips back here. So I'll put this voice, and I'm going to line it up approximately with where our music, or I'm going to actually put it a little bit farther than where our fade in starts. And I'm actually going to do another fade out here with the music. So I'm going to unmute this track, and let's move our bell down. If I want to move a track down, I can just use that and make it smaller. So let's listen to this now. Welcome to the Owen Roberts podcast. So my voice is much quieter than my music. So I'm going to do a couple things here to fix that. First, I'm going to normalize the voice. So I'm going to bring it back to the normal audio level. So I'm going to go to Effect and go to Volume and Compression and just click Normalize. And I'm actually going to set the peak to 0 because my voice is pretty quiet. And so now that normalizing is a really good way to basically take a piece of audio that's recorded quietly and make it sort of reach kind of like the highest and lowest amount of your volume that you're working with. If the audio is too loud, it'll actually bring it back down. So it kind of brings both sides to the same place. So let's listen to that. Welcome to the Owen Roberts podcast. Okay, so that's better, but it's still too quiet. Let's normalize this other part as well. And apply. Okay, so we definitely want the music to be quieter in general, so I'm actually going to use the fader here, even though I don't use it that often. I'm going to bring it down to like -12 and see how that sounds. Welcome to the Owen Roberts podcast. So that sounds pretty good, but I'm also going to fade out a little bit as I'm talking. So let's click on our music track and bring the automation tool back. And this is tricky because if I just add a dot here, whoops, I'm gonna start fading out immediately. So one thing that you need to do with automation is add multiple dots. So if I want this volume to stay for a while, I need to add a dot there. And whoops, just hit Command Z to undo that. It's hard to get it exactly where I want it, but let's do that there. And then I'm just gonna do like a little bit of a fade out right here. So let's see how that sounds. I'm gonna go back to my selection tool and move to here. Welcome to the Owen Roberts. So that's pretty good. It's subtle enough that I can't really tell that it's getting quieter, but it does get quieter to make room for the voice track. So let's move this voice track a little bit closer here, and let's listen to that together. Welcome to the Owen Roberts podcast. Today, we are looking at editing audio with Audacity. Okay, it's great performance, of course. So I'm gonna cut this little clip here because I'm not really talking at the end of that. And then I'm gonna go in and do a fade in and out of my vocal tracks just so I don't get any clipping there. I can't really hear any clipping, but if somebody was listening to it very loudly, they might hear it. So I'm gonna put my selection tool before these tracks. When you're zooming in and out, you really wanna use the selection tool because it's gonna zoom into that selection. So I'm gonna go to my first track. I'm just gonna take this little bit of audio and I'm just gonna add in a little fade in. And I'm gonna go over here and just add in, I'm just gonna select that end and do a little fade out. Okay, so then I'm gonna zoom out again and select this one, and I'm gonna do the same thing. So I'm gonna zoom to that section, I'll zoom out just a little bit, and this one's a little longer actually, so let's put this here and zoom in, and then I'm just gonna fade this bit. So before I start talking, you're not gonna notice anything, but it's just gonna avoid any nasty clips in the audio. So then let's fade out a little bit and put the tool over here. and zoom in back here, and let's fade that out. Okay, so now I know that my vocal audio is not going to clip at all. So then the last one thing I want to do is I'm going to put this little bell at the end just to kind of signify, this is the beginning or something like that. So let's make the music track a little smaller, bring in the bell and unmute this. And I'm just going to drag this down here. And now let's listen to all of it together. Welcome to the Owen Roberts podcast. Today, we are looking at editing audio with Audacity. So that volume is actually pretty good. I'm going to move this back just a little bit to get the timing better. Audacity. And I can see if we zoom into this, since this was we downloaded this from freesound.org. People who work with Freesound, I think generally are very, they take audio seriously. So you can see they already have fade in and out on this track, so we don't need to add that. But you might want to just double check and look at the audio for that. Okay, so let's go back to here. So I have a lot of extra music that I don't need for my edit, so I'm just going to delete all this. If you're doing something longer, of course you're going to want to have this, but my demo is very small, so I'm just going to fade my music out. I don't know, use more automation for this. So after the bell, I'm just going to add a couple more points of automation, and I'll fade the music out over time. And then let's clip this to here. Okay. And let's listen to the whole thing. Welcome to the Owen Roberts podcast. Today, we are looking at editing audio with Audacity. Okay, so that's a pretty good fade out. I could kind of, play with the actual duration and times there a lot more, but this is good enough to kind of show what we want to show. So you're going to have more tracks than this. You have to have at least 5 different tracks, and you may have a lot more depending on what your goal is with this project. But it basically works like that. You can just keep adding audio in, you can edit that audio, you can automate, and you can get it sounding how you want. So for now, I'm going to just export this and show you how you can post it on the blog just to show your progress for this week. Next week, I'll go over doing some stuff with effects and doing some kind of more interesting things that you can do with the program. But for now, this is good just for our basic edits. So let's go to export. We talked about this in the first video, but let's just review real quick. So I'm going to save this project. So let's just go to save, make sure we've got all our edits together. And then we're going to export some audio. I'm going to go with an MP3 for this. It's going to be super small, but you're probably going to have a longer piece, so you probably want to use an MP3. So let's go in here. Let's call this edit 2 since I already have an edit 1. And I'll just click export. And so now if I tab over to my project, got my edit2.mp3. If I'm on a Mac, I can hit spacebar to preview the audio. If you're on PC, you have to open it or download a preview app, but there we go. So that sounds pretty good. So now we can put this on to our OpenLab post. So let's go to the OpenLab and we're going to create a new post. So I'll click on the plus button and I'm going to say my audio edit 1. And let's give it a category. So this is a weekly blog post. So this is just an update post. This isn't our final version of it here. And so now we're going to add some media. So we added images on OpenLab before. If we want to add audio, I can click on this plus button and type in audio. We get an audio player. And then I can either drag and drop or I can upload my file from there. So I'm going to upload edits. And it'll make a little audio player. So I can say this is my first edit for my audio portrait of a place assignment. And if we want to preview that, we can take a look at what it's going to look like. And with the audio playback, the default sort of audio player, it's very bare bones, but it does what you need it to do. We can hit play and we can hear that that's playing. And then there's also a menu over here if you want to download it or change the playback speed, and you can scrub around and you can change the volume. But that's pretty much everything we need for this. So that looks pretty good. If I'm happy with that, I'm just going to click publish twice and we're good for this week. So yeah, as I mentioned, let's go back to the class blog for just a second and look at the assignment. So as I mentioned in the previous video, this assignment is just like a prompt. So if you want to do something a little bit different, that's fine. The basic requirements are that you have to have at least one audio that's recorded yourself and at least one audio that you find on the web. However many you use of those two types, it doesn't matter as long as you have both. Your piece should have at least 5 different tracks or sounds. And so make sure to have that. And when you submit the piece, which will actually be in a week, because this is a relatively short topic, make sure you're going to submit the AUP3 file, and that's how I'll be able to see your edits there. So I'll go over that next week. The other thing is you want to try to tell a story with a clear beginning, middle, and end. Depending on what you're working on, this could mean different things. If you're doing like an interview, you might have a few different questions that kind of introduce a person, ask them a question, and then maybe work around a theme or something like that. But yeah, those are kind of the basic requirements. If you have other ideas for things that you would like to do with this, let me know. We can talk about that. But then eventually we're going to have a very similar process to how we submitted the self-portrait assignment. I will go over that in more detail next week. So that's it for this video. Let me know if you guys have any questions, and if you want to go over anything in office hours or on Discord, just let me know. And otherwise, have a good week, and I'll see you guys in the next video.